Star Wars might be the most polarizing media franchise to ever exist. I think that there are two reasons for this. The first is that the quality of anything to come out of Star Wars seems to be just random. Like sometimes we just get incoherent garbage like Star Wars Acolyte, and then sometimes we somehow make something amazing like Andor. The video games are the same. Sometimes we get something good like Jedi Survivor, and sometimes we get something bad like Jedi Survivor on PC. The second reason I feel like Star Wars as a franchise is so polarizing is that there are now like 4 to 5 different generations of people who have grown up on Star Wars, and each generation likes Star Wars for different reasons. Whatever you make, one part of the fandom it's just gonna absolutely hate it. But I think that there is something that every single Star Wars fan can just collectively agree on. That's that we are all just sick to death of Tatooine.
Kay Vess, the underworld's favorite new scoundrel. This is your one shot. A safe filled with 157 million credits.
It's a death wish.
You want to live? Get in with the underworld's most dangerous syndicates. And pull off the greatest heist the Outer Rim has ever seen.
I'm in.
No. Wait.
Star Wars Outlaws. It's an Ubisoft game. If you've ever played an open world Ubisoft game, you know exactly what you're getting into. It's a bit of Far Cry, it's a bit of Watch Dogs, it's a bit of Assassin's Creed. The character dialogue is questionable, but the gameplay is fun, sometimes. It ticks all the boxes of a typical Ubisoft game. It's pretty much as expected. One of my biggest gripes with Star Wars Outlaws is the intro to the game. The introduction to the game takes up about the first hour or so of game time, and it does not put its best foot forward, gameplay-wise or story-wise. During the intro to the game, we're introduced to Kay, our main playable character, who starts off the story with next to no likable characteristics. We'll get back to her. We have a pet sidekick, Nix, who is, the token Star Wars cute, marketable mascot. Even though I know why Nix exists, he's cute enough to just warm even my cold, dead, cynical heart. And we're also introduced to the villain, who might as well have been replaced by a poster note apology to the players for forgetting to write a compelling villain. I'm not even joking when I say that this guy does nothing the entire game. The story starts off with Kay, who lives in the attic of a bar owned by this guy Bram. Bram is a cool guy and probably the only character that actually gives off a good first impression during the first hour of the game. Kay is a thief who has been on a string of bad luck, and she decides to take on a risky job in hopes of being able to pay for a shuttle to get off world or something. For the job, she needs to repair her data spike. Bram offers her the credits to get it fixed, but instead Kay decides to just steal money off random people to pay for it. Kay has this very lone wolf vibe at the beginning of the game, and it makes sense to start her character off with some less than stellar character traits so that she can learn and grow. It's pretty obvious where they're going to take her character from here. I can honestly tell you that, there's no surprises when it comes to Kay's character moving forward or where she's going to end up as a character. Also, the game did this weird thing where the gameplay was in a cinematic widescreen aspect ratio. Not just the cutscenes, but the actual gameplay. This threw me through a loop because I was like, oh, did my game start off in the wrong resolution? But no. I don't know if this was set by default for anyone else, but I can't imagine anyone would willingly choose this setting. It was an interesting experiment, but no thank you. The stealing credits to pay for our data spike acts as a tutorial for our companion Nix, who you can pretty much command to do whatever, steal, distract, jump on someone and maul the crap out of them. He's useful for stealth and grabbing items in places that you can't reach, but taking the time to try and use him in combat is just kind of time wasted that you just be shooting people instead. After repairing the data spike, we infiltrate a club and witness the saddest looking rave that I've ever seen. We steal this thing that we're after, but it predictably went wrong, and then we pissed off the low crime syndicate, and then we had to bail. When we get back to our place, Bram tries to cover for us and gets shot in the leg, and then we finally get like the first sight of life from Kay's character when she shows concern for Bram. Bram gives Kay a high-risk job that will get her off planet, which in this mission we join a crew of people who needs our help to break into a vault owned by Mr. Post-it Note. On our way there, we get like hands down some of the worst dialogue that I've ever heard in a video game.
Hope Bram's okay. Taught me so much. Look how I paid him back.
Like, what the fuck were they thinking? God, I hate Ubisoft writing, man. Like, the only dialogue that we needed here was, I hope Bram is okay. We can infer how much that relationship means to Kay from the delivery of the line, and later on, when a character mentions Bram, mentioning that he's okay, and we can infer that from Kay's reaction. Speaking of later down the line, we do a heist, break into the vault, expecting treasures and money. Instead, we find some dude. Kay is upset that there isn't actually any money and pulls a gun on the crew, expecting to get paid right there and then in the vault. She's kind of lucky that she only gets like stun gunned, but like this whole series of events is so contrived. This whole thing is just kind of an excuse to get more FaceTime with Post-it Note, but he doesn't really do or say anything before Nyx helps us escape. And like I said, he doesn't do anything for the rest of the game. He is a shit villain. After that, there is a set piece where we steal a ship and the game pretends we're doing something in this like extremely on-rails event where the only thing we do is just press 2 buttons. Oh, this looks cool, but my hands are not on my controller for like the entire thing. So that's how Star Wars Outlaws starts. And I know I spent a lot of time on this, but I'm being serious when I say that this first hour to an hour and a half of the game, it's easily the worst that this game gets. Because like after this, once the game starts opening up, it gets better. It gets a lot better. It honestly feels like a different game. Like we get characters with charisma that I actually wanted to spend time with. The story gets more interesting, especially when the 4 crime syndicates are introduced and you can do missions for each one. Even the first story mission that I did past the intro had more interesting level design. It had a bit more interesting story going on. And I get that the levels in the introduction were more or less a tutorial, but it didn't need to be such a slog. And the real reason that it is bloated out to such a degree is to accommodate its lackluster story. The only real standout things that I took away from the first hour and a half of the game was the music and the visuals, but other than that, I feel like the intro could have easily just been reduced to a single mission, and we could have just saved 45 minutes of unnecessary bloat. Now, I know I was pretty down on the intro, but it isn't the worst thing in the world. But the main thing it does is it squanders any good first impressions that the game has any chance to make. But once the game actually gets started, what we essentially get is Far Cry Star Wars Edition. If you go into the game with that in mind, then you know exactly what you're getting. Like pretty much all Ubisoft open world games, the world is big and beautiful, but the sandbox is shallow and the game is just riddled with bugs. Although the bugs were mostly minor, I didn't come across anything majorly game breaking, but there were just tons of little irritating things here and there. And there's also rats. There are a lot of rats in this game. Although there might be a little alien rats, but like there's a lot of them on the floor everywhere and it's really, really strange. Something I don't often find myself talking about enough when I review games is setting. Like, wow, so exciting, right? Outlaws has a pretty impressive range of just things that you can tweak. Not only when it comes to accessibility settings, but tweaking how the UI works, or even changing the difficulty of just individual little parts of the game. There's the cinematic mode that I mentioned earlier. That's the setting. One setting I found that was very useful for me was the permanent waypoints on screen. Usually your waypoints are relegated to the compass thing at the top of your screen, but I've found that navigation was proving to be a bit hard for me. I found myself looking at the map a lot more than I thought I should be, and so the permanent waypoints on my actual screen was super helpful. But if we go into the settings, we can find settings for almost anything. Like, you can really make this game as difficult or as easy as you need to. Like, if you think the lockpicking rhythm minigame is too hard, then you can make it easier, or you could even just turn it off altogether. But you can go in the opposite direction. You can make it harder. It leaves the overall game's difficulty in the hands of the player, and I like that. There could be a case made that maybe you shouldn't be able to fully disable the lockpicking minigame, but I mean, like, while I enjoyed the lockpicking in this game, I can't deny that I thought about turning it off after the 100th time that I had to like open a door or a crate. Well, I think these settings work perfectly for this game, but you know, in a better designed game that you probably don't need it. Moving on to performance. Performance in this game is fairly decent. I am playing this game on PC and I have an RTX 4070 Super, although my CPU is a little lower than what is recommended for the high graphics tier. But for the most part, the game ran really, really well. I only had any significant frame drop and game slowdown in the first main mission hub, but other than that, the game looked and ran fantastically, and that's with, recording on top of running the game itself. There are a few times where I found myself just absolutely blown away by the look of some of these environments throughout the game. And you know what? It does justice to how Star Wars is meant to look. There was no part while I was playing Outlaws and I thought anything in the game stood out as looking out of place, except maybe that sad club at the start of the game. Outlaws, it just nails the environments. Every planet I visited was unique and had fantastic art direction. Hell, there were even times where even Tatooine looked beautiful, and I really hate Tatooine. I found minimal graphical glitches overall, and the ones that I did find, I wasn't sure if it was because of some graphical setting that was the problem. I guess like the drawback to the extensive settings menu is that theory crafting ways to fix like minor graphical errors would just take forever, but small little graphical glitches that I had didn't really detract from the gameplay. I think this game looks phenomenal. And while I'm talking about things that I liked about the game, let's talk about arguably the best part, and that is the music. Once again, nails the feeling of Star Wars. The orchestral score feels like it was just ripped straight out of one of the movies. Although there is just some like random, just straight up bass that is kind of just way too loud comparatively to everything else. And sometimes it just plays during dialogue scenes and it's really, really strange.
How do you feel about crossing imps?
Not good. Kate, tell her not good.
I thought that's a no-no around here after I
Where's
pull this
that?
off.
You don't, but that's the game we play.
What?
And yeah,
Hell, a
I
bass
play
coming
better
from?
than most.
That's just like the soundtrack. The bass works when added in conjunction with the orchestral score, and it just gives like a bit of extra gravitas, and it helps give the soundtrack an identity. It is amazing. I think this is hands down the best part of the game. It is straight up Star Wars. It just works. What doesn't just work though is the writing. Look, I think you already kind of know where I'm going with this. The story and characters in this game are just inconsistent quality-wise. I found Kay to get better as a character as the story went along. I was very ho-hum on her, but once the droid ND5 enters the story, Kay has a personality to bounce off of. And he works as kind of like a straight man who doesn't really put up with any of Kay's bullshit. And it works great. And the banter between these two is what kind of kept me from, just turning the voices off altogether, really. Like, once these two are in the story together, well, the dialogue works. I will say though, the majority of the game is just kind of not written well. Any mission you do, whether it be a story mission, side mission, anything, just flip a coin and you will get a halfway decent story or you'll get first draft dialogue. I keep saying that it feels like an Ubisoft game. It feels like an Ubisoft game. I don't know how they make these games just all feel so samey, especially with the writing. The story of Star Wars Outlaws is set between episodes 5 and 6 in the main timeline, and as such there are a couple of characters from the movies that are included in the game. For the most part, I think their inclusions are fine. Jabba makes sense. I think his inclusion to the story is, alright. Kira, which is, if you don't remember, Emilia Clarke's character from Solo, is also in the game. I also think she's fine. These are the kind of characters that I feel like are okay to include in a game where it feels like it doesn't directly tie into the main story of the movies too much. There is an exception to this though, with a character inclusion late into the story, which I won't spoil, but their inclusion serves almost no purpose narrative-wise, other than to just be a very gratuitous fan service cameo. If you've played the game, then I didn't like it at all. I thought it was a step too far. You brought this character in to just do that. I was like, alright, whatever. Look, I'm just gonna move on. The story, it's lackluster. So, despite me playing on PC, you've probably noticed the Xbox prompts come up, and that is because, yes, I'm playing this on a controller. I do first-person shooters with a keyboard and mouse, but I do third-person shooters and action games with a controller. That's just how I do. Outlaws is available on console, so I don't feel bad saying that the controls are just kinda shit. To start, we'll talk about Kay's blaster. It has 3 different modes: damage, shield breaking, explosive. To swap between these modes, you need to tap Y to swap between the damage and the shield one, but to swap to explosive, you need to hold Y. It's a little clunky, but it works. The problem is that when we add something like the grenade, to pull it out, we need to push left on the D-pad, then select it with A, and then throw it. It's just kind of a clunky bunch of button prompts that, in the heat of battle, I'm just not going to bother trying to press. It's kind of the same with changing the blaster modes. It works, but it's clunky. I just have to ask the question, instead of having like grenades and stuff on a different button prompt and swapping blaster modes on Y, like can't we just have a weapon wheel? Like the weapon wheel in gaming has been a standard for a while now, and I don't see any reason to change that, especially if you're not going to substitute it with something better. They're just clunky. It's functional, but it's not optimal. Which leads us into general gameplay. I'll start off with the combat. It's very stock standard, serviceable. I wouldn't go as far to say it's, very fun, but it does get better over time. This is due to Kay's blaster, which is the only weapon you can have on you permanently, and it starts off really shit. But over time, with some upgrades, you can make it into something, better. I personally loved the rapid fire attachment, and once I was able to put that thing on my blaster, I was having a lot more fun. But customization is very limited. There are only a few different changes you can make for each mode of the blaster, but you can pick up weapons from dropped enemies, but they only have limited ammo and you drop it when you run out of ammo or do any action that isn't really related to combat, such as climbing something. You'll just drop the weapon. Yeah, it feels like the variety sucks a bit. Being able to use other weapons is kind of situational at best. Stealth is the other main way to play the game. I've never been much for stealth gameplay. It's fine in this game. Again, very stock standard, no innovation really happening. And for the most part, you can choose freely how you're going to approach each mission, whether it be, full-on combat or stealth. Although sometimes missions will force you into either stealth or combat. But if they're forcing you to do one, the difficulty will be toned down for it. The biggest reason I found neither the combat or the stealth really stood out to me is because the enemy AI in this game is just questionable. Fuck.
Let's look into that. Time to distract them next.
Distract him. Not that one.
Must have been the wind.
At ease.
More often than not, enemies will just stand still and shoot, or they will beeline it straight for you, which makes it exceedingly easy to just put myself in a position for them to push me one at a time, or I can just sit behind cover and wait for the instant kill Red Dead gunslinger ability to charge. Look, the AI are just mindless.
You're not supposed to do that!
Nix, we're spotted.
While we're still talking about gameplay, I want to talk about travel. The map sizes in this game are pretty big. There is fast travel around the place, but only if you've already visited the location before. The main mode of transportation around the map is the speeder bike. I really dislike this thing. Its handling is meh, but the main problem is that it's just kind of boring to drive. There are often times where you'll need to cover large distances in this thing, and I was just bored. Now, because I ran afoul of the Pike Syndicate early on in the game, they would frequently send out death squads after me while I was on my speeder bike. This would happen almost any time I'd be driving out in the open world, and it actually kept me from getting bored out of my brains. If we want to go off-world, there is the Trailblazer ship, and I'll give the game props. I actually really liked the flying controls of this thing and the ship combat. I thought it was really well done. The controls are very reminiscent of one mission from Halo Reach. It's almost exactly the same. Although I found the flying around actual space and picking stuff up a little boring. Everything's very spread out and just kind of boring to get from place to place. Although the space, the actual environment itself, fantastic. Looks great. Now, Star Wars Outlaws is a fairly decently sized game. I think if you were just playing the main story missions alone, there are about 20, give or take, main story missions to do, which puts the game around the 13 to 15 hour mark to complete if you're just straight focusing on the main missions. But being an open world game, there is a lot of side content to do. Depending on how much you want to do, I feel like a full completion could easily take you up to around about 30 hours plus. There are a lot of contracts to do, collectibles to find, and side missions, faction missions. I finished this game while doing a little side content here and there, and I was happy leaving the game at the 18 hour. In conclusion, Star Wars Outlaws is an okay game. I definitely think that it captures the spirit of Star Wars, although I think most of the heavy lifting of capturing the spirit of Star Wars was done with its visuals and the music. As for the story, I think the mileage may vary from person to person. Like I said earlier, there are 4 to 5 different generations of Star Wars fans, and each one likes Star Wars for different reasons. This story won't please everyone. Personally, I was pretty underwhelmed by the overall main story. Some of the side missions that I did were better. I think the missions with the storylines based around the crime syndicates, the 4 crime syndicates, were the better ones and better written, as well as the story missions that focused like directly on assembling your crew members. Those ones tended to be a bit more fun and a bit better written. It is when it all comes to like a head at the end, which I won't spoil anything, it was a bit mediocre. But I think the main part where Star Wars Outlaws falls short is the gameplay. It is just a little undercooked. I feel like this game needed another year or 2 maybe to just really beef up the lacking components. Mainly the combat. Nothing in this game ever feels downright bad. It's just mostly bland or mediocre at worst. I would be happy calling this game a 7 out of 10. It's fine for what it is. Do I recommend it? Kind of. If you can knock this game out in a month and don't care about owning a permanent version of the game, then at the price for Ubisoft Plus for a month, makes this game well worth the price. Would I recommend buying this game at a retail price or any of the premium editions? Absolutely not. The game doesn't quite reach the quality of a AAA title and the price tag that comes along with that. Like, think of it this way, if Star Wars Outlaws was a food, it would be a Big Mac from McDonald's. It's not really good food, but sometimes you just feel like a Big Mac. Sometimes you feel like an Ubisoft open world. You know what you're getting when you buy one, but you wouldn't pay anywhere near $70 for a Big Mac. Although, I'd probably pay $70 for a vinyl copy of the soundtrack, if that were to ever come out. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, then please leave a like, and if you are new, then please consider subscribing. Have you played Star Wars Outlaws yet? If you did, then let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. Thank you so much to my YouTube members, Controlled Killer, Dr. Whovian2, and Yellow. If you think my content is worth supporting financially, the option is currently there as a YouTube member. The perks are there on the screen. I also have a community Discord that is free to enter, where you can suggest videos, ideas, or chat with me, or anyone else around the community. And I also have a Steam curator page that I have been building up some quickie little reviews on. If you're interested in any of these things, then links are in the description below. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.